What would you do if your world was turned upside down in an instant, if the very people sworn to protect you became your worst nightmare? Meet Danielle Harper, an innocent woman whose life is shattered and a corrupt police officer burns her car, and her world spirals into chaos. But what happens when she finds herself in the fight of her life, uncovering a dark criminal empire while being hunted by the very people meant to serve justice? The stakes couldn't be higher, and the danger is closer to. It was a sweltering summer afternoon in Lakeview, a small town tucked away in the heart of Georgia. The heat clung to the air like an oppressive shroud, but the bustling streets betrayed no hint of relief. Among the hum of car engines and chatter of pedestrians, a tense moment was brewing on the corner of Elm Street. Danielle Harper, a determined black woman in her early 30s, had parked her car, a modest blue sedan, outside a local grocery store. She had worked 2 jobs to pay off that car, a source of pride and independence. Inside the store, she was unaware of the storm that was about to unfold outside. Officer Richard "Rick" Morrison, a white police officer with a reputation for a short temper and a long list of dubious encounters, sat idly in his cruiser across the street. He noticed Danielle's car parked slightly askew in the spot, its rear bumper barely over the faded yellow line marking the space. To most, it was a non-issue. To Officer Morrison, it was the spark for something far more sinister. Rick's hand hovered over the dashboard as he radioed in a bogus report. "Dispatch, this is Officer Morrison. Got a vehicle parked illegally outside Green's Grocery. Gonna investigate." When Danielle exited the store, her arms full of grocery bags, she noticed the officer standing beside her car, his eyes hard and accusing. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. Rick smirked. "Problem is, your car's parked illegally. That's against the law, ma'am." Danielle frowned, glancing at the line. "It's barely over." "I didn't think it was an issue. It's not up to you to decide what's an issue," Rick cut her off, his voice sharp. He reached for his ticket pad, but something in his demeanor suggested this was about more than a parking violation. "Look," Danielle began, "if it's really a problem, I'll move it right now." But Rick wasn't interested in reason. "You people think you can do whatever you want," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. Danielle froze. "Excuse me?" Rick's smirk widened. "You heard me." The tension was palpable as a small crowd began to gather, their murmurs filling the air. Danielle, refusing to back down, set her groceries on the sidewalk and stood her ground. "This is harassment," she said. Rick's eyes glinted with malice. "You think this is harassment? You ain't seen nothing yet." Without warning, he pulled a lighter from his pocket. Before anyone could react, he leaned over and set the corner of Danielle's car seat on fire through the open window. Gasps erupted from the crowd. "What are you doing?" Danielle screamed, lunging toward him, but Rick shoved her back. "Step away, ma'am," he barked, as though he hadn't just committed a crime in broad daylight. The flames grew quickly, fueled by the intense heat of the day. Danielle's heart pounded as she watched her car, the product of years of hard work, turn into an inferno. Tears stung her eyes, but rage burned hotter. "Someone call the fire department." A bystander shouted. Amidst the chaos, a sharp voice pierced through the din. "Freeze!" Everyone turned to see a tall, muscular black man in plain clothes holding a firearm. His badge glinted in the sunlight. "Federal Agent Marcus Quinn," he announced, his tone commanding. "Put your hands where I can see them, officer." Rick's smirk faltered. "What's this about?" "It's about you abusing your power," Agent Quinn replied, his gun steady. "Drop the lighter and step back." Rick hesitated, his hand twitching toward his holster. The crowd held their breath. "Don't do it," Quinn warned, his voice like steel. But Rick was nothing if not predictable. He went for his gun, moving with practiced speed. A deafening crack split the air as Quinn fired, hitting Rick's hand and sending the gun skittering across the pavement. The crowd scattered, some screaming, others pulling out their phones to record. Rick clutched his hand, blood oozing between his fingers. "You'll pay for that." He spat. "No," Quinn said coldly, advancing. "You're the one who's going to pay." Before Quinn could cuff him, Rick lunged for his weapon. Another shot rang out, this time grazing Rick's shoulder. He howled in pain but didn't stop, his desperation driving him to madness. Quinn kicked the gun away and tackled Rick to the ground. The two men grappled, the struggle fierce. Rick landed a punch to Quinn's ribs, but Quinn retaliated with a swift elbow to Rick's jaw. Enough. Quinn growled, pinning Rick down. You're under arrest for arson, assault, and misconduct. The fire department arrived just as the flames consumed what little remained of Danielle's car. The firefighters worked quickly to extinguish the blaze, but it was too late to save the vehicle. Danielle watched in stunned silence, her hands trembling. When the fire was finally out, she approached Quinn, her voice shaking. Thank you. Quinn nodded. I'm sorry this happened to you. He'll face justice. Rick, now cuffed and bleeding, glared at Danielle as he was dragged to a waiting police cruiser. This isn't over, he snarled. Danielle met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. You're right, she said. It's just beginning. The next morning, the story of Officer Rick Morrison's shocking actions had spread like wildfire. The viral footage, recorded by multiple bystanders, showed him lighting Danielle's car on fire and being taken down by federal agent Marcus Quinn. News outlets across the nation picked up the story, painting a grim picture of police misconduct and the fight for accountability. Danielle, however, wasn't basking in the attention. She sat in her modest kitchen, the smell of burnt toast lingering as she stared blankly at her phone. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some of support, others filled with venomous hate. A knock on the door broke her trance. Startled, she peeked through the peephole to find Marcus Quinn standing on her porch, holding a folder. She opened the door cautiously. Agent Quinn. What are you doing here? Call me Marcus, he said, offering a small smile. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're holding up. Danielle crossed her arms. I've been better. My car's gone, my face is plastered all over the news, and half the town thinks I'm the villain here. Marcus frowned. That's why I'm here. There's more to this than just your car. He handed her the folder. Inside were documents, photographs, and reports, evidence of Rick Morrison's long history of misconduct. This man has been a problem for years, Marcus explained. Bribery, excessive force, racial profiling, it's all in there. The department has been covering for him, but this time, he went too far. Danielle scanned the papers, her anger mounting with each page. Why wasn't he stopped before? Because people like him know how to manipulate the system, Marcus said. But we're not going to let that happen again. I need your help. My help? Danielle asked, raising an eyebrow. You're the key witness, Marcus said. Your testimony, combined with the video evidence, could finally bring him down. But it won't be easy. Rick has powerful friends. Danielle hesitated. The idea of facing Rick again, let alone the entire justice system, was daunting. But as she looked at the smoldering remains of her life's work, she felt a surge of determination. All right, she said. I'm in. Marcus nodded. Good. But first, we need to talk about your safety. The words were barely out of his mouth when a sharp crack echoed through the air. Danielle flinched as the window behind her shattered, a bullet embedding itself in the wall. Get down. Marcus shouted, pulling her to the floor. Chaos erupted as more gunfire tore through the house. Marcus drew his weapon, his eyes scanning the room. Stay here, he ordered, crawling toward the window. Danielle's heart raced as she huddled under the kitchen table, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Marcus peeked outside and spotted a black SUV parked down the street. Its windows rolled down. Muzzle flashes lit up the vehicle as the attackers fired relentlessly. He returned fire, his shots precise and deliberate. One of the SUV's tires exploded, causing the vehicle to swerve. Who are they? Danielle shouted over the gunfire. Friends of Rick, most likely, Marcus said grimly. They're trying to silence you. As the SUV screeched away, Marcus helped Danielle to her feet. We need to move. Now. He led her out the back door and into his car, a black sedan with tinted windows. As they sped away, Marcus kept a close eye on the rearview mirror. Where are we going? Danielle asked, her voice trembling. Safe house, Marcus said. It's secure, and no one knows about it. You'll be safe there. They drove in tense silence, the weight of the situation settling over them. Danielle couldn't shake the image of her shattered window or the sound of bullets ripping through her home. When they arrived at the safe house, a small cabin tucked deep in the woods, Marcus ushered her inside and locked the door. "This place has reinforced walls, a backup generator, and enough supplies to last a month," he said, checking the perimeter. "You'll be fine here." Danielle looked around, her fear giving way to frustration. "This is my life now. Hiding out in the middle of nowhere because some corrupt cop has it out for me." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's temporary. Once we take Rick down, you can go back to your life." Danielle sighed, sinking onto the couch. "If I even have a life to go back to." As night fell, the safe house remained eerily quiet. Marcus monitored the security cameras while Danielle tried to rest. But sleep was elusive, her mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. Around midnight, the stillness was broken by the low rumble of engines. Marcus stiffened, his eyes narrowing as he checked the monitors. "They found us," he muttered. Danielle bolted upright. "What do we do?" "Stay low," Marcus said, grabbing his weapon. "I'll handle this." The cabin's exterior lights flickered on, revealing 3 armed men approaching the door. Marcus positioned himself near a window, his gun trained on the intruders. "Stand down," he shouted. "You're trespassing on federal property." The men exchanged glances before opening fire, their bullets pinging off the reinforced walls. Marcus returned fire, his shots expertly aimed. Danielle watched in terror as the firefight escalated, the cabin echoing with the sound of gunfire. One of the men fell, clutching his leg, while the others retreated behind a nearby tree. "We're not leaving," one of them shouted. "Hand her over, and we'll let you live." "Not happening," Marcus growled, reloading his weapon. The attackers launched another assault, their bullets shattering the porch railing. Marcus moved swiftly, taking them out one by one until the final man fled into the woods. When the dust settled, Marcus turned to Danielle. "Are you okay?" She nodded shakily. "Yeah. Thanks to you." But Marcus's expression was grim. "This isn't over. They'll be back, and next time, they'll bring more firepower." Danielle's resolve hardened. "Then we'll be ready." The cabin was quiet again, but the stillness felt fragile, like the eye of a storm. Danielle sat at the dining table, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of lukewarm tea. Her nerves were frayed, but her resolve had solidified during the firefight. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her life, not anymore. Marcus was pacing in front of the security monitors, his jaw tight with concentration. Every so often, he would glance at Danielle, as if to reassure himself that she was still safe. "I called for backup," he finally said, breaking the silence. "They'll send a team to reinforce us, but it might take a while. Until then, we need to stay vigilant." Danielle nodded, her voice quiet but steady. "What's the plan if they come back before the backup gets here?" Marcus stopped pacing and looked her in the eye. "We hold our ground. They're desperate, which makes them dangerous. But desperation also makes people sloppy." Danielle leaned back in her chair, her mind swirling with questions. Why are they going to such lengths for Rick? He's just one cop. Marcus sighed, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. "It's not just about Rick. He's part of a larger network, people in the department and beyond who have a lot to lose if he goes down. If you testify, they're exposed. That's why they're coming after you." The weight of his words sank in. This wasn't just about her car or even Rick's actions. It was about dismantling a corrupt system. As dawn broke, Marcus worked on fortifying the cabin further. He set up additional barriers and tripwires around the perimeter while Danielle helped as best she could. She wasn't used to this kind of work, but she was determined to contribute. By mid-morning, the tranquility was shattered once more. The faint hum of engines grew louder, and Marcus's expression darkened as he checked the monitors. 3 vehicles, he muttered. SUVs, heavily armed. Danielle's stomach dropped. "What do we do?" Marcus grabbed his rifle and tossed her a small handgun. "You remember how to use this?" She nodded, though her hands shook as she held the weapon. Marcus had given her a crash course the night before, but she prayed she wouldn't have to use it. The SUVs stopped just short of the cabin, their occupants spilling out with military precision. 10 men, all armed to the teeth, began advancing. "Stay inside," Marcus ordered, taking up a position near the front window. Danielle crouched behind the couch, her heart pounding as she clutched the gun. Leave now, and no one gets hurt. Marcus called out. The lead attacker laughed, his voice dripping with arrogance. Hand over the woman, Quinn. You don't stand a chance against us. Marcus's reply was a single gunshot, hitting the man square in the shoulder. The attacker screamed, dropping his weapon as chaos erupted. Bullets rained down on the cabin, but the reinforced walls held firm. Marcus moved like a predator, firing with precision and taking down two more attackers. Danielle's breath caught as a window shattered nearby. A man tried to climb through, but she reacted instinctively, firing her handgun. The shot missed, but the loud crack startled the intruder, causing him to retreat. Good job. Marcus shouted, reloading his rifle. The attackers regrouped, using the SUVs as cover. One of them fired a grenade launcher, the explosive round hitting the cabin's side. The force rocked the building, sending debris flying. Danielle screamed, her ears ringing as she scrambled to her feet. Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her to the ground. They're trying to flush us out. He yelled. We can't stay here. Danielle shouted back. Marcus nodded grimly. There's a tunnel beneath the cabin. It leads to a shed about half a mile away. Go now. What about you? I'll hold them off, Marcus said firmly. Danielle hesitated, but the determination in his eyes left no room for argument. She grabbed a flashlight and followed his instructions, finding the hidden trapdoor beneath the kitchen rug. As she descended into the tunnel, the sounds of gunfire and explosions faded slightly, replaced by the musty scent of earth. The narrow passage was dimly lit by the flashlight. Its walls lined with wooden beams. Danielle's mind raced as she moved as quickly as she could. She couldn't shake the guilt of leaving Marcus behind, but she knew she had to survive. Reaching the end of the tunnel, she climbed up into the shed. It was small and unassuming, tucked into a dense thicket of trees. She peered out the window and saw no sign of the attackers. Minutes felt like hours as she waited, her body tense and her finger hovering over the trigger of her handgun. Finally, the faint sound of footsteps reached her ears. She raised the weapon, her hands shaking. Danielle. Marcus's voice called softly. Relief flooded her as she opened the door to find him standing there. Blood staining his shirt but otherwise unharmed. They retreated, he said, his voice strained. For now. What about the cabin? Destroyed, Marcus said grimly. But we're alive. That's what matters. Danielle helped him inside, her mind already racing with what their next move should be. The shed was eerily quiet, the oppressive stillness only interrupted by the labored sound of Marcus's breathing. He leaned heavily against the wall, clutching at the blood-soaked fabric of his shirt. Danielle knelt beside him, her trembling hands searching for the source of his wound. Let me see, she urged, her voice wavering but firm. Marcus winced as he pulled his hand away, revealing a deep gash along his side. It's just a graze, he muttered through clenched teeth. Yeah, and it looks like it grazed half your torso, Danielle shot back, grabbing a first aid kit from a shelf in the corner. She worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Marcus watched her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. You've got a knack for this, he said. I've had to be good at taking care of things, Danielle replied, her voice tight. Life doesn't always give you a choice. The moment was interrupted by the faint hum of an engine in the distance. Both of them froze, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. They're regrouping, Marcus said grimly. Danielle swallowed hard. What do we do now? Marcus pushed himself to his feet, his movements slow but deliberate. We need to keep moving. They'll search the area until they find us. But where can we go? I have a contact in the city, Marcus said. Someone who can help us lay low and gather more resources. It's a risk, but staying here isn't an option. Danielle nodded, grabbing the handgun she had barely learned to use. Her resolve was growing with each passing moment. They slipped out of the shed and into the dense forest, the trees providing some cover as they made their way toward a dirt road Marcus claimed would lead to their escape route. The air was heavy with tension, every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves making Danielle jump. Suddenly, Marcus held up a hand, signaling for her to stop. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the shadows ahead. What is it? Danielle whispered. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He pointed toward a faint glow through the trees, a pair of headlights approaching slowly. Patrol, he said under his breath. They're searching for us. Danielle's heart pounded as she followed Marcus into the underbrush, their movements painstakingly silent. The vehicle came closer, its spotlight sweeping the forest floor. Stay down, Marcus murmured, his voice barely audible. The SUV stopped just a few yards away, its doors opening as two men stepped out. They were armed, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. You sure they came this way? One of them asked, his tone impatient. Positive, the other replied. Quinn's tough, but he's not invincible. They couldn't have gotten far. Marcus motioned for Danielle to stay put as he silently maneuvered around the men, his footsteps as quiet as a predator stalking its prey. Danielle held her breath, clutching her handgun tightly. Before the men could react, Marcus sprang from the shadows, taking one of them down with a swift blow to the head. The other spun around, raising his weapon, but Danielle acted on instinct. She fired a single shot, her aim shaky but true. The man crumpled to the ground, clutching his leg. Marcus glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Nice shot, he said. Danielle's hands trembled as she lowered the gun. I didn't think, I just. You did what you had to, Marcus said firmly, picking up the fallen men's weapons. Let's move. They continued through the forest, the encounter fueling their urgency. By the time they reached the dirt road, the faint glow of dawn was breaking through the trees. Marcus led Danielle to an old pickup truck hidden under a tarp. He checked the vehicle for signs of tampering before nodding in satisfaction. Hop in, he said, starting the engine. As they drove toward the city, the tension began to ease, though neither of them let their guard down completely. Marcus explained their next move, meeting his contact, a tech-savvy ally who could help them uncover more evidence against Rick and his network. We need to hit them where it hurts, Marcus said. Expose everything they've been trying to hide. Danielle nodded, her determination growing. I'm ready. But as they approached the city outskirts, a black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror, its headlights glaring like the eyes of a predator. Looks like we've got company, Marcus said, his tone calm but serious. Danielle's stomach dropped. What do we do? Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. Hold on. The SUV accelerated, closing the distance between them. Marcus swerved onto a side street, weaving through traffic with practiced skill. They're not giving up, Danielle said, glancing back at their pursuers. Let's see how far they're willing to go, Marcus replied, his voice edged with determination. He made a sharp turn onto an empty industrial road, the SUV hot on their heels. The pursuing vehicle attempted to ram them, but Marcus anticipated the move, slamming on the brakes and causing the SUV to swerve wildly. Grab the shotgun under the seat, Marcus ordered. Danielle hesitated for only a moment before pulling out the weapon. She rolled down her window, bracing herself against the wind as she aimed at the SUV's tires. Steady, Marcus coached. She fired, the blast deafening. The shot hit its mark, blowing out the front tire and sending the SUV skidding into a lamppost. Marcus didn't slow down, pushing the truck to its limits as they put distance between themselves and the wreckage. When they finally reached the city, Marcus pulled into an underground parking garage and shut off the engine. We'll be safe here for a bit, he said, his voice calm but his eyes scanning their surroundings. Danielle exhaled shakily, her adrenaline finally ebbing. That was intense. Marcus smirked. Welcome to my world. As they exited the truck, Marcus led her to a hidden door in the corner of the garage. He knocked twice, then paused, before knocking 3 more times. The door opened, revealing a young woman with sharp eyes and a laptop tucked under one arm. Took you long enough, she said, smirking at Marcus. Good to see you too, Lyra, Marcus replied. We've got work to do. Lyra's gaze shifted to Danielle, her expression curious. You must be the infamous Danielle Harper. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Infamous? Lyra grinned. After everything you've been through, you're practically a legend. Let's make sure it stays that way. The dimly lit room where Lyra led them felt like stepping into another world. Rows of monitors lined the walls, each one displaying feeds from security cameras, maps, and encrypted data streams. The air hummed with the faint buzz of electronics, and Lyra moved with practiced ease, dropping her laptop onto a cluttered desk before typing rapidly. Marcus, you've really gotten yourself into it this time, Lyra said without looking up. Marcus smirked, leaning against the wall. You love a challenge. Lyra glanced at Danielle, her expression softening slightly. You holding up okay? Danielle nodded, though her exhaustion was beginning to catch up with her. As well as I can be. Considering. Lyra gave a sympathetic smile before focusing back on her screen. Alright, let's see what we're dealing with. Marcus filled Lyra in on the events leading up to their arrival, from Rick's attack on Danielle's car to the escalating violence. Lyra listened intently, her fingers flying across the keyboard. They're not just after you, Lyra said, pulling up a series of documents. Rick and his network are panicking. Your testimony, Danielle, could blow the lid off an entire operation. We're talking bribery, extortion, trafficking, you name it. Danielle's stomach churned as she processed the weight of what Lyra was saying. And they'll do anything to stop me. Exactly, Lyra replied. But they're also sloppy. Their desperation leaves a trail, and I'm really good at following trails. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. What are we looking at? Lyra pulled up a map with several blinking red dots. These are safe houses and stash spots connected to Rick's operation. They're heavily guarded, but if we can hit one, we might find something that blows this case wide open. Danielle hesitated. Hit one. As in, go there. Not just go there, Marcus said. Take it down. Expose what they're hiding. Danielle felt a wave of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by a flicker of resolve. She had come this far, there was no turning back now. When do we start? She asked, her voice steady. Marcus and Lyra exchanged a glance. Tonight, Marcus said. The hours leading up to the raid were a blur of preparation. Lyra provided a detailed layout of the target location, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was heavily fortified, but Marcus had a plan. This isn't just about taking them down, Marcus explained as he checked his weapons. It's about gathering evidence. We need something solid to take to the authorities. Danielle nodded, her grip tightening on the handgun Marcus had given her. She had practiced shooting under his guidance, her confidence growing with each session. As night fell, the three of them piled into a nondescript van that Lyra had outfitted with surveillance equipment. The drive to the warehouse was tense, the silence broken only by Lyra's occasional updates. Security's tight, she said, scanning the live feeds from the warehouse. Armed guards at every entrance. You sure about this? Marcus nodded. We don't have a choice. They parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows for cover. The warehouse loomed ahead, its exterior bathed in harsh floodlights. Stick to the plan, Marcus whispered. Lyra, you're on comms. Danielle, stay close to me. They moved quickly and quietly, Marcus taking out a lone guard with a swift blow to the back of the head. Danielle's heart raced as they slipped inside through a side door. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery. Voices echoed in the distance, and Danielle's grip on her weapon tightened. Over here, Marcus whispered, leading her to a stack of crates. He peered around the corner, his eyes narrowing. There's a storage room up ahead. That's where they're keeping the records. As they moved closer, a pair of guards rounded the corner. Marcus acted instantly, taking down one with a silenced shot. The second guard raised his weapon, but Danielle reacted instinctively, firing her handgun. The man dropped, and Danielle stared at him for a moment, her chest heaving. You did good, Marcus said, his tone steady. She nodded, swallowing hard. Let's keep moving. They reached the storage room and found it locked. Marcus worked quickly, picking the lock while Lyra guided them through the earpiece. You've got company, Lyra warned. 3 guards headed your way. The door clicked open just as the guards appeared at the end of the hallway. Marcus pushed Danielle inside, taking cover as the gunfire erupted. Stay down. He shouted, returning fire. Danielle crouched behind a desk, her ears ringing from the chaos. She watched as Marcus expertly took down 2 of the guards. The third advanced, but Danielle seized the moment, firing a shot that caught him in the shoulder. Nice work, Marcus said, giving her a brief nod before turning his attention to the room. They began searching through the files and computer terminals, gathering as much evidence as they could. Lyra guided them through the process, her voice calm despite the tension. You're looking for anything that ties Rick to this operation, she said. Danielle's eyes landed on a file marked confidential. She opened it, her breath catching as she read the contents. Marcus, she said, holding up the file. This is it. Names, dates, transactions, it's all here. Marcus glanced over her shoulder, his expression grim. We've got what we need. Let's move. As they prepared to leave, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the warehouse. They're coming, Lyra said urgently. Marcus grabbed the file and motioned for Danielle to follow. They navigated the maze of crates, narrowly avoiding detection. The exit was in sight when a group of armed men appeared, blocking their path. Marcus raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a deafening explosion shook the warehouse. What the? Danielle began, but Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a side door. Lyra must have triggered the distraction, he said. They burst into the night air, the chaos behind them growing louder. Sirens wailed in the distance, and Marcus smiled grimly. Looks like Lyra called the cavalry, he said. Danielle exhaled shakily, clutching the file to her chest. They had made it out alive, but the fight was far from over. The city skyline loomed in the distance as Marcus, Danielle, and Lyra made their way back to their temporary hideout. The streets were unusually quiet for a city that never seemed to sleep, the calm only broken by the distant wail of sirens. They hadn't been able to fully shake off the sense of danger, and every shadow felt like a threat. Lyra, any word on the cops? Marcus asked, his voice low as he watched their surroundings. Lyra checked her phone, her brow furrowing. The raid we triggered has the department in chaos, but I'm seeing a lot of heat around the city. It's not just the cops, Rick's network is probably going into full lockdown mode. You two have become public enemy number one. Danielle felt a sickening chill at the thought. What now? We can't just keep running. No, Marcus said, his tone firm. We need to get the evidence into the right hands. If we expose Rick and his network, they'll be dismantled. Lyra nodded. But getting it to the authorities isn't going to be easy. We need a secure channel, someone we can trust. Marcus pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number. As it rang, he motioned for Danielle to follow him inside the rundown building they were using as their temporary base. The fewer people involved, the better, Marcus muttered as he stepped through the door. We don't want anyone else caught in the crossfire. Danielle's heart pounded in her chest. But she nodded. She was tired, physically and emotionally, but there was no turning back. The phone call ended, and Marcus looked up, his eyes narrowing. We're meeting my contact in 2 hours. They'll take the file and get it to the right people. But there's one catch, Rick's people will be expecting us to make a move. We'll have to outsmart them. How? Danielle asked, her voice tight. Lyra, you have anything that could throw them off our trail? Lyra grinned. Always. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Just stay low, keep your heads down, and I'll make sure we have a clean getaway. Marcus nodded. All right. Let's get ready. We don't have much time. 2 hours later, the team was ready. Lyra had arranged a false trail to confuse anyone who might be following them, planting decoy messages and misinformation that would make it appear as if they were headed in the opposite direction. We'll meet at the old docks, Lyra said as they huddled near the entrance. The contact will know to look for us there. Danielle's mind raced as they approached the docks in a nondescript car. The fog was thick, swirling around them like a cloak that hid their movements. This is it, Marcus said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. Stay sharp. They parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way, their footsteps muffled by the thick fog. As they reached the designated meeting spot, Marcus scanned the area, his hand on the grip of his weapon. Looks clear, he muttered. Let's make this quick. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and lean, dressed in black tactical gear. The man's face was obscured by a mask, but his posture was confident, professional. You're late, the man said, his voice cold. Had some obstacles to deal with, Marcus replied, his tone tight. You've got the money. The man pulled out a briefcase, setting it on the ground between them. He opened it to reveal stacks of cash, but Marcus wasn't interested in the money. He motioned to the file Danielle was holding. Take it. Marcus said. We've got everything you need. Make sure this gets to the right people. The man took the file without hesitation, his eyes scanning the contents before nodding. You did good work. But Rick won't go down easily. Be prepared. Marcus didn't flinch. I'm ready. Without another word, the man disappeared into the fog, leaving them alone in the eerie silence of the docks. That's it? Danielle asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. It's over. Marcus shook his head. No. This is just the beginning. Rick's people will retaliate, but now we've got leverage. We just need to stay ahead of them. As they turned to leave, the faint sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the distance. Marcus's expression hardened. Not so fast. From the shadows, a group of men emerged, their weapons drawn. Rick's men. They had found them faster than Marcus had anticipated. Drop your weapons, Quinn, one of the men growled. This ends now. Marcus's eyes flicked to Danielle, his voice low but urgent. Get down. Before Danielle could react, the first shot rang out, followed by a hail of bullets. Marcus returned fire, his movements precise and calculated. He was a blur of motion, ducking behind crates and containers, taking down the attackers one by one. Danielle scrambled for cover, her heart racing as gunshots echoed around them. The fog made it difficult to see. But she could hear the screams of the men as they were taken down. She clutched her weapon, unsure of what to do, but knowing that she couldn't just stay hidden. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the side, using the thick fog for cover. She spotted one of Rick's men advancing, his back to her. Without hesitation, she fired, the shot landing squarely in his chest. He dropped to the ground, lifeless. Nice shot, Marcus called, his voice tinged with approval. But the battle was far from over. Another group of men appeared, coming from the opposite direction. Danielle and Marcus were trapped, surrounded on all sides. Lyra, we need backup. Marcus shouted, his voice strained. The sound of screeching tires reached their ears, and moments later, a car careened around the corner, skidding to a halt. Get in. Lyra's voice rang out. Without a second thought, Marcus grabbed Danielle's arm and pulled her toward the car. They dove inside just as the sound of gunfire erupted again. Go, go, go. Marcus yelled at Lyra, who floored the gas pedal. The car shot forward, speeding away from the chaos, leaving the wreckage of the docks behind. But as they drove into the night, Danielle couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Rick's network wasn't going to let them off that easily. The road ahead was a blur of streetlights and shadows as Lyra expertly navigated the winding streets, her hand steady on the wheel. Marcus sat in the back seat, eyes scanning the horizon, always vigilant. Danielle sat beside him, her thoughts racing as she clutched the file that held the damning evidence of Rick's criminal network. The silence in the car was suffocating. They had narrowly escaped the gunfight at the docks, but the danger was far from over. Danielle's heart was still pounding from the rush of adrenaline, but the gnawing sense of dread that had been building within her since the moment Rick's men had shown up at the docks remained. They'll be coming after us harder now. Marcus said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a hard edge to it. Rick knows what's at stake. He won't let us expose him without a fight. Danielle nodded, though she felt her stomach churn. What's our next move? We get this file to the right people, Marcus replied, his tone firm. The police are corrupt, but there are still those in the force who want to see justice done. We'll use the evidence to build a case they can't ignore. Lyra glanced at them through the rearview mirror. We don't have much time. If Rick's men figure out what we're doing, they'll go after anyone who might be able to help. And that includes the police. Which is why we need to move fast. Marcus said. We'll go underground for a while, lay low, and keep our heads down until we can make contact with the right people. Danielle's mind raced as she thought about the path ahead. A part of her wanted to run, to disappear and leave all of this behind. But the truth was, there was no escaping now. Rick's network had far too much power, and it was only a matter of time before they found her again. No turning back now, she muttered to herself. What's that? Marcus asked, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Danielle shook her head. Nothing. Just thinking. They drove in silence for a few more miles, the tension in the air growing with each passing minute. The streets grew quieter, the city giving way to more industrial areas as they neared the edge of town. Suddenly, a figure stepped out into the road, blocking their path. Lyra slammed on the brakes, and the car screeched to a halt just inches from the man. Get out of the car. A voice shouted from the shadows. Danielle's heart skipped a beat. Marcus, What the hell is going on? Lyra hissed, her voice low and urgent. The man in the road stepped forward, his face illuminated by the headlights. It was a familiar face, Detective Simmons, a cop Marcus had worked with in the past. What the hell is he doing here? Marcus growled, leaning forward in his seat. Simmons raised his hands, signaling for them to stay calm. I'm not here to hurt you, he said quickly. I'm here to help. Danielle's brow furrowed. Help? After everything? Marcus didn't trust the man, and it was clear from his posture that he was on high alert. What do you want, Simmons? Simmons glanced around, making sure no one else was nearby. I know what you're doing. I know what's in that file. He motioned toward the briefcase Danielle was holding. Rick's got his claws in deep, but there's a faction of us who are still on the right side of this. You expose him, and we expose everything. We take him down together. Danielle exchanged a glance with Marcus. Was this a trap? Could they really trust Simmons? Marcus, Lyra said quietly, we don't have a lot of options. If he's telling the truth, this might be our shot. Marcus hesitated for a long moment before nodding. Fine. We'll meet you at the safe house. Simmons gave a quick nod. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But we have to be quick. Rick's men are already onto you, and it won't be long before they start looking for anyone connected to you. Without another word, Simmons disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. Marcus turned to Lyra. We need to get to the safe house now. And we need to make sure no one's following us. Lyra didn't hesitate. She put the car back into gear, accelerating down the road. The safe house wasn't far, but every moment felt like an eternity. As they drove, Marcus checked his phone, scanning the latest news. There was no mention of the docks incident yet, but he knew that would change soon. They had bought themselves a little time, but not much. Hold tight, Lyra warned as she took a sharp turn. We'll be there in 5. When they arrived at the safe house, a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of town, they piled out of the car and hurried inside. Lyra set up her equipment while Marcus and Danielle went to the back room to prepare. Danielle placed the file on the table, her hands shaking slightly as she opened it again. The information inside was explosive. But it was also dangerous. If Rick's men found out they had it, they would stop at nothing to retrieve it, and to silence anyone who got in their way. Marcus paced back and forth, his eyes flicking to the windows every few seconds. This is it. We expose him, and we end this. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Who is it? Marcus called, his voice tense. It's me, Simmons answered from the other side. Marcus opened the door, and Simmons stepped inside, his expression grim. The feds are on their way. We've got maybe an hour before the whole thing goes public. You have to make a choice, now. Danielle looked at Marcus, her heart pounding. This was it. They had everything they needed to take Rick down. But the cost could be more than they were willing to pay. I won't run anymore, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. Marcus nodded, a grim smile on his face. Then let's make it count. As the feds arrived and the case began to unfold, Rick's empire started to crumble. It wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. As the network of corruption and crime was exposed, the dominoes fell. Rick was arrested, and those who had worked alongside him were taken down one by one. But Danielle knew that this wasn't the end. It had taken everything to get here, and the scars would remain. The truth had finally come out, and Rick's reign of terror was over. But for Danielle, the fight was always about more than just revenge, it was about justice. And in that moment, she knew she had won. And that's the incredible journey of Danielle Harper, a tale of resilience, courage, and fighting back against corruption when all the odds are stacked against you. From the fiery destruction of her car to uncovering a powerful criminal empire, Danielle's story reminds us that justice always finds a way, even in the darkest of times. But what about you? What would you have done in Danielle's shoes? Could you have faced the danger head-on or taken another path? Let us know your thoughts in the